Well, welcome, Chris DeNeui, to our second episode of Supporting Leaders. I am super excited to have you. Chris and I actually go back a few years. We both worked in the same school district together. And so Chris was a huge asset and mentor to me. And I'll read you a little bit about her background and then let her share anything else. But she has been in the world of education for 27 years. She started as a second and third grade teacher at Boyer Valley. Then she did 7 years as an elementary guidance counselor at West Marshall, 12 years as an elementary principal, and now she is in her 4th year as elementary principal at Nevada. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the elementary school that you're at, is it still the largest student population-wise in the state of Iowa?
That's a really good question. I don't know if it still is. I know at one time we were like in the top 3. On a normal year, we would have about 650 kids in our building. This year with COVID, it's a little bit different. We've got some online learners, but yeah, our average is between 620 and 650 in our building.
Yeah, and then so how many staff members do you supervise?
Just under 100. And that I guess that's not all that I supervise. That's in my building. Those are the ones that I consider having relationship with. So that would be, include kitchen staff and custodial staff, but about just over 50 certified staff. And then we've got about 20 paraeducators and then some other people.
Yeah, I mean, that is significant. When I think about across the board and leadership and, some of the different guests that we have on this podcast, supervising close to 100 staff, that's a big number. So I want to hop into this, obviously with, our current climate and landscape, and people saw the inauguration yesterday, and we have a vice president as a female. And, regardless of what people think politically, it's exciting to see a woman in a leadership position like that. And, one of the things I think is interesting to look at is how many women are in education. And then you look at how many women are serving in a leadership role. And there's a big discrepancy there sometimes where it's still a lot of men serving in a leadership role, and they do a great job too. But I'd love to hear from you, like, when did you feel like you kind of heard the calling to be in leadership? Was there a calling? When did you identify, I'd really like to explore leadership?
I think all along I've had this, I don't know, maybe it's, calling to do some sort of leadership. I never really knew what that felt like. I think when I was a classroom teacher, I felt like that calling was to be a counselor, and that was how I could lead people. After I had got my job as a counselor and was thinking about, what's next, and I had in my career, I have only, at that point, had only worked for one female leader. I had one female principal when I was a counselor. And honestly, she wasn't very good. And I remember thinking to myself, I can do a better job. Like, that was my motivation, good or bad. At the time, that was it. And I just remember thinking to myself, I think I like people. Relationships are really important to me. And so at that time, that kind of put that fire in me, thinking, you know what, I can do this and I can do a better job. And that motivated me. And just that lack of female role models. At that time, I didn't have any kids. And I just remember thinking, gosh, what kind of role models are we giving? The stereotypical elementary principal at that time was a man in a suit. And that was just had kind of been what people expected in my vision.
Yeah, so I didn't include this in the biography when I introduced you, but also important is that, you're married to a husband who teaches and is a basketball coach, and you have 3 daughters. One's going to be 21 soon, or is? And then what are the ages of the other 2?
20 and 15.
So how old were the kids? Did you have kids when you went into leadership? And then, what was that? That's a whole different thing, I think, to balance as a woman in leadership. I interviewed my dad in the podcast that went out last week, and he talked about how, when, as he is a supervisor of female staff, how, there's just that added layer, because sometimes as women that we bring in that guilt of, am I doing a good enough job as an employee? Am I doing a good enough job as a mom? And so, what's it like to be a woman in a leadership position and, be a wife to somebody who's busy and to have 3 children?
Hands down, that is single-handedly, that is the most difficult struggle that I have. I have a unique situation. I don't know of many other people that this happened to. Maybe it's happened to a lot, but I interviewed for the principal job when I was 8 weeks pregnant. And so I knew that I was pregnant. Nobody else knew that I was pregnant at that time. So I started my first year as an elementary principal in August and had a baby in October.
Oh my gosh.
And had 2 little ones at home. That was my third baby, my third little girl. So I had 2 little ones at home, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time. And then started this job in August and had a baby in October. And so it was very, very challenging that first year. I think I don't know how I did it,
Yeah.
honestly, because I look back and you just do it. And you do it because you think you're Superwoman and you think you have to. And at the time, I remember thinking I had to prove myself.
Yeah.
Because of that, that's happened throughout the years. And that mom guilt is a real thing. And I think that's something that has been so beneficial for me as a leader, as a female leader.
Hmm.
When I have employees that come to me and they're like, anymore it's not, but early on, as I started my leadership journey in each place, you have to build those relationships. And right up front, I've always said family comes first.
Yeah.
If I ever had to choose between family and my job, we would be poor, but we would be happy because I
Right.
would
Right.
quit my job. Uh,
Hmm.
that's just how it is for me. And so, knowing that and having those conversations with staff, when staff come to me and they're like, gosh, can I leave early? My son has a basketball game or a wrestling meet or a drama production or, numerous times throughout the year, this happens. Our staff members are moving in their children to college the same time that we're starting our PD here.
Gosh.
And
Yeah.
over the years, we've had numerous teachers that have come to me in tears and said, I have to miss the first day of professional development or the second day of PD because my son moves into college. And I've also had people come and say, yeah, I'm going to have to miss moving my kid into college because we have PD. And my thought is, no, you're not. You don't miss those
Yeah.
milestones.
Yeah.
And so, but balancing that is so hard. There's this tug of, I need to prove myself as a female leader,
Hmm.
just as leader in general, but I think that female thing is,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, the drive in me is feel like I have to go above and beyond.
Yeah.
And yet on the flip side, balancing that with kids at home, and being a role model for them. Over the course of the years, I have failed epic amount of times with finding that balance, because it's
Yeah.
not really a balance, it's a fit,
Yes.
the
Yes.
leadership lifestyle fit.
Yep.
So there are seasons in my life that my family knows that I'm going to work late and it's just the way it is. And they are going to have to, I might miss a few meals, and I never miss bedtime ever. That's just something that has always been, especially I don't put them to bed anymore, but when they were little, that was my time, was at night. And sometimes it meant getting home from work at, 5:36, eating supper with them, playing with them, putting them to bed, and then working again after they went to bed. But finding that balance of who you are and what your values are is so important, because if I'm going to be a leader, I feel like I have to model what I tell them. If I'm telling them that they need to leave early to get to their kids' things, then I need to do the same. And they need to see me do that. I feel like it's important for them to see me, heading out the door. Just last Thursday, a teacher came in and I'm like, sorry, gotta go. Josie has volleyball practice and it's my night to drive. A lot of times I'm at their beck and call. They need something and I'm like, yep, I've got, do you have a minute? In my head, I'm thinking, no, I don't. But yeah, of course I do. Yeah, because that's what we say. You know, we always say we have time. But then there are times that I think it's important for them to see us putting our family first.
Totally agree. And I would say too, even that as a former colleague of yours, for me to witness that was impactful for me as well. And, so when I came into Nevada, I was pregnant and had a baby and then had another baby, and I remember you talking about your story
Yeah,
and
it's
saying
crazy.
like, well, I wouldn't recommend it, it's like, wow, that's so true. Like, I wouldn't recommend it. But however, like, I think you telling that story and sharing that story is inspiring, because it's like, it can be done. Like there's women all over the place who are, whether it's going into the principalship or another role in leadership, and you're wanting to have a family or are starting a family or do have a family, and it can be done. Like there's just additional hurdles that we'll go through. But you talking about the, like, I love that it's not really the word balance, there's no such thing, but it's just finding that fit, and it's different. It's different for all of us. I want to talk a little bit too with you about culture, because I think that you've just done some tremendous things there at Central Elementary, and your school has been a showcase school for capturing kids' hearts for what, 4 years? 4 years in a row?
Mhm. Yeah,
So talk to us a
it's
little
4
bit
years.
about, so what is capturing kids' hearts? What does that mean to be a showcase school for capturing kids' hearts? And what are the elements of that, or of your building culture, that's really allowed you guys to be successful with that?
Sure. So I can't take credit for starting that or getting the ball even rolling on that. Joel Fye really was the leader that I think really got the ball rolling on that. And so I stepped into it after they had gotten their first. I think he did all the hard work. So they had already gotten their first year of it, and then so just continuing that. And knowing that, capturing kids, being a capturing kids' heart school for us really comes down to, I mean, there's lots of layers to it, but the simple part of it is that relationships matter most. And so we use something called the Excel model, and part of that is the very first time you greet someone, you greet them with a handshake. You look them in the eye and you shake their hand, and that's been hard with the pandemic, because my instinct is still, it's really really hard for me to meet someone for the first time and not extend my hand out to
Yeah,
shake their hand.
yeah,
Um, and so, and teaching that to our kids. So our staff, 100% of them greet their kids at the door every single day. It's that connection piece. It's looking into their eyes and seeing them. It's really easy for people to say they're fine, but when you really look into their eyes and see into their soul,
yeah,
whether they're fine or they're not fine. And we do the same thing with our employees. And so, they do surveys. It's, asking kids, part of it is also a student thing. It's not just what we report, but it's also, surveying students and saying, how do you feel? Do teachers treat you well? Do they treat each other well? Do you respect
hmm,
each other? How do you treat me? How do I treat you? How do we treat each other when there's conflict? I think that's another, thing that's sometimes difficult, but if you have that relationship piece down, and it's not always easy. Relationships are hard and sticky, but if you focus your energy on relationships, the rest of it, it really does fall into place. I know early on in my career, I read some of John Gordon's work and some of Todd Whitaker's work. And I feel like early on that kind of molded me into thinking, I read The Energy Bus and read it so long ago, but there are pieces of that that really stick with me, and making sure that we are, creating a positive culture and environment. And when you do that, people will do things for you, and there's a respect factor that when you have a relationship with someone, they will do hard things for you, and they will do things that you want them to do because there's this relationship piece, and they know that I will go to bat for them at any time, as I know that they will go to bat for me. It's this, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours culture,
yeah.
with the added layer of the importance of relationships and culture. And really, that's what it's all about. It really is that simple.
Yeah, so I'm curious about, the building relationships. I think too, with your school counselor background, comes very naturally to you. And I'm wondering too about, like, when you first stepped into leadership and thinking about building relationships, like, you know, like you hear people say that a lot, but like, what does that mean? Like, what actually is building a relationship? You know, because I think when I first became a leader, I wasn't sure what that meant, and I wasn't sure where the line was. You know, does that mean that I'm going out to dinner with my staff after work? Does that mean that there's a boundary there and I don't interact with them after work? Do I add them on Facebook? Do I, you know, like I think like it can be so difficult for some to say, well, how do I build a relationship? So what was that for you? What were some of the things that like, this is how I build relationships with people?
And I think it's different for everyone. I think it's different for every company. But for me, I've learned a lot along the way. And once again, I think where I'm at today is because of all my failures.
Mhm.
There's no doubt in my mind that that I think back of all the times that I've done things wrong, and that's I reflect on that now, and I think I'm
Yeah,
also fairly reflective. But that's when I've learned the most on those hard times. I've had some
yeah,
really tough situations and really hard times, and those are the times I've learned the most. But for me, that building that relationship is really about learning about each of my employees, and that takes time. I
hmm,
send them a survey at the very beginning of the school year, and I ask for personal information. I ask about who their family is, and what their favorite drink is, and what their favorite sweets,
hmm,
you know, is what kind of books do they like to read. If they could, you know, go on a vacation anywhere, where would they go? Just to kind of get a picture of who they are.
yeah,
And thinking about, you know, buying someone a pop every once in a while doesn't build relationship. That relationship piece is in the personal stopping in, and
yeah,
taking time for that. So, you know, I think relationship building is one of the most time consuming parts of a leadership job. And in that first year or second year or 15th year, you still
yeah,
have to work at. So like forcing myself to get, and it's not really forcing because I love doing it, but you know, spending time in the morning before it gets chaotic, getting into classrooms and popping in, you know, oh, hey, Colleen, and remembering that she was talking about, you know, that her son was moving back. Hey, did your son get moved
yeah,
back? And you know, hey, how was the soccer game this weekend? We share good things at every single meeting we have, whether it's a staff meeting, whether it's last night we had a meeting on a student, and we started with sharing good things. And so, you know, we always start with that. It can be something personal or professional, but remembering those things,
yeah,
and just, you know, tapping into that, you know, how's your mom doing? How's your dad doing? How are you doing after your loss of your grandma? So those kinds of things, getting to know them, and then knowing
yeah,
where to draw the line. Have I over the years gone out for drinks with my staff? Yes. Is it fun? Absolutely. But then you got to know when it's time to go home.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Got to know when it's time to, you know, are there certain staff members that you're going to be closer with than others? Absolutely. That's just, I think, human nature. But your staff also needs to be able to see you as a leader, regardless of what we do. We're always that person. You know, it feels like we don't ever get to take that hat off.
hmm,
Um, you know, and that's a choice that we've made. We've made that choice that now, does that mean that when I, you know, go out, if I don't feel like I can have a beer? No, that's not the case at all. If I want to have a beer, I'm going to have a beer in public because that's what I want to do.
yeah,
Um, but I think that there's that really getting to know people. And then the
hmm,
other side of that, the other relationship side of that, is building that relationship at work and letting them see you do what you say you're going to do.
yeah,
I think that's another part. So there's this relationship part on a personal level. And then when you're at work, it is you saying that you're going to do something, and that they see that you do it, and that there's follow through, and that they see you lead in the manner that you say that you're going to lead in. You know, just talking about making tough decisions is one thing, but when they see you make a tough decision,
hmm,
that builds that relational capacity. When you talk poorly about another staff member to another staff member, that registers with them. You might think you're
yeah,
building relationship, sharing information with them, but really you're not. So it's, you know, making sure that you are, um, you know, being the kind of leader that they need at work, in a professional way and in a personal way.
Yeah, so many great things in there. And I wanted to touch on a little bit too, like you talking about like just the intentionality of it. Because while you love to build relationships and it comes naturally to you, but you do still have to be intentional about it because, whether you're a principal or somebody in another leadership role, there's so many things coming at you. And it'd be so easy for you, I'm sure right now, as soon as we're done, to do the email and you pick up the phone and call some things or just start checking off tasks that are on your list. And so you do have to be very intentional about, no, I'm going to put that aside. I've heard some people talk about, I do email after work so I can make sure I'm intentional about building those relationships. So
Yeah, and that there are days that that's so much harder than others.
yeah.
Early on, I have no idea where I heard this from or where I read it. I don't even know. It's just something that stuck with me. But you think about, many of us have a to-do list,
Yeah.
regardless of what profession you're in. We have this list of things that I need to get done today, and then we have all these interruptions. And I come back to oftentimes that those interruptions are way more important than my to-do list, because the
Mm-hmm.
interruptions are the people. Those are the kids, they're the parents, or the people. Yeah, I've got a list of things I want to get done today, but at the end of the day, I could add to that list of all these interruptions that come in that are really the important part of the job.
Yeah, total mindset shift. But I love that. Well, I want to end with, do you have like a piece of advice for people who are either in leadership or looking at leadership, or is there, something that we didn't talk about today with leadership that really want to share?
Gosh, that's a tough question. I could talk about this forever. I just love this. I think
No.
just, find your passion, do what makes
Mhm.
you happy. I teach confirmation on Wednesday nights, and last night we were talking about the fact that the world needs leaders and the world needs followers.
Mhm.
And if the world was full of leaders and no followers, think of the conflict that we would have.
Yeah.
And the world also needs followers who are going to be loyal to their leaders.
Mhm.
And because of that balance, I was encouraging them to figure out where they fell in that. Are you a follower? And if you're a follower, be the best follower you can
Yeah.
be. If
Yeah.
you're a leader, be the best leader you can be. And so I think, one of the most impactful books that I read was called Your Best Yes by Lisa Turkust.
Hmm.
Um, and it's all about contemplating the things that you say yes to.
Mm.
And the book is always saying yes to God, and are the decisions that you are making going to please Him. And I also put that in my professional life and my personal life. And I think, that's probably the biggest thing I can, that makes my world go round, is trying to find that when I make decisions, are they my best yes? Are they what's best for kids, for parents, for staff, and for me?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
remember, I have to be a part of that equation. Sometimes I think as leaders and especially as female leaders, we fail to do that. We fail to include ourselves in that. Is this the best decision for everyone? Is this best for me as well as everyone else? And trying to find that fit, and just doing what makes your heart happy. You see people in leadership positions all the time, and I sometimes feel sad for them, because it seems like they don't love what they do.
Yeah.
And so I think it just comes down to finding your passion, and then do it. Don't be a zoo tiger, be a jungle tiger, and go, uh, be, do what you want to do, and do it well, do it hard, and put the work in, because then it pays off. And it just it's a important to find what makes your heart happy.
Wow. Well, Chris, that was outstanding advice to end on. And, you have been so instrumental in my own journey of, happiness and finding that work fit. And so I'm excited for other people to have an opportunity to hear this and to learn from you, because you're so inspiring and you just do such a wonderful job. And I just thank you so much for being on the show this morning and sharing all of that wisdom with everyone.
Well, thanks for asking me. This was fun.
Yeah, it was. Thanks, Chris.
All right. See you, Lisa.